Hi, Seth.
Hello, hello. We may not be having a meeting today.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, first time attending this, so I was like,
Oh,
oh,
sorry.
well,
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's on the calendar. It's supposed to be, so I don't know where our leaders are.
that's not good. I know someone on the calendar said that they were sick, but
See what else is going on. Oh, hey, Caleb. Okay, we've got more people. We're trying to figure out whether we actually have a meeting today.
There's meant to be. I pinged Jeff and Amir to have something added to the agenda. So I was assuming it's on.
Well, whatever you want to propose, we can pass it.
It's not. Oh, I don't know if it's a make a decision on things, but let's have a look. Oh no, Jeff can't make it. Oh, hopefully Amir can. Oh, thanks. I will add my employer. I don't know if Amir can make it. If he's going to make it. Let me see.
looks like yes.
Sorry. That's handy.
Hello. Sorry for being a couple minutes late there.
It's all right.
So, Caleb, who else are you able to call forth with your magical powers?
Oh, let's have a look. David Wheeler, maybe you can join us.
And
I'm just looking at the list of attendees. Yeah, maybe not. This is like the less popular version of this meeting. Just need more APAC. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries at all. I was just gonna say, yeah, I have to admit the different times have thrown me off a couple times. So I'm guessing other folks might be feeling that as well. So no worries. I mean, it totally happens. For some folks, it is time zones, so it is totally understandable. But I'm glad we have at least a couple folks here to have quorum for today, the 29th of June. So yeah, regrets from Jeff, who wasn't feeling well, so he couldn't make it today. I guess we could start like we normally do with any new faces. If anyone would like to introduce themselves.
Yeah, so I'm Seth Larson. I was just recently hired by the Python Software Foundation to be the security developer in residence, and I'll be representing the Python ecosystem as much as I can in these meetings, and so hopefully become a regular face here.
Fantastic.
That's great. Yes, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, that's wonderful. What time zone are you normally based in?
Yeah, so I'm US Central, but my previous employer was actually Elastic, and they are a globally distributed company. And so I'm extremely versed in working at different hours of the day, early in the morning and late at night. Whatever needs to happen.
Awesome. Well, yeah, very, very happy to have you here. would we want to everyone just give a quick introduction to Seth, just to give him some context as well?
Sure,
Not to
my
put you on
mic's
the spot,
unmuted.
but we'll
Oh,
start with Caleb.
yeah. I'm like, oh, I was the fool who didn't mute themselves. I work at Google on the Google open source security team. We have Dustin Ingram, who's on the PSF as well. He works on our team. Yeah, so I've been working particularly on the package analysis project, but also on the criticality score project for a while as well. So the criticality score, I don't know if you're familiar with either of those, but I might be talking a bit more about the former in a few minutes. So get some context on that. But our team's basically job is big overlap with OpenSSF about trying to make open source secure for people to consume. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Caleb. Oh, and wonderful. So your summoning powers did end up working, and we have David Wheeler as well. We were giving Seth a quick introduction of ourselves, just to give Seth some context of who he is joining this meeting with. So Caleb gave a nice quick introduction.
All you needed was a blood sacrifice, and
Well, started out with just Seth and I mean, everybody was coming late in the time zone and everything. And so there was like, Caleb shows up and then Caleb said, oh, well, I guess Amir's like me. And then Amir shows up. And then I just said, well, who else should we, call forth? And like, David Wheeler. And David Wheeler shows up. Caleb just has some amazing powers. I don't know. Maybe this is a new feature of Bard.
Yeah. And
excellent.
Cool.
Well, I said, maybe is this the real David Wheeler, or maybe this is generative AI David Wheeler? From, how what new features has Google developed today?
Yeah, if this is the person you're summoning first, this is bargain basement here. I would summon someone with a little more power than me.
You sell yourself short.
Oh, well, thank you. All right. So let's see here. So the 29th, and I see someone's already added my name. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm David Edelson. I work at IBM Research. I'm part of the GCC steering committee, lead a new toolchain working with the Linux Foundation and OpenSSF on the core toolchain project to create a robust infrastructure there. Also with security, part of the GNU toolchain community, and also participating in a lot of helping with Jeff Borick and the IBM security team and OSPA team and their participation with the Linux Foundation and with specifically the OpenSSF.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I can go next. I'm Amir Montazeri of OSPIF.org, the Open Source Technology Improvement Fund. I'm the managing director. We specialize in helping open source projects improve their security posture. So we work with a ton of open source researchers, consultants, fuzzing experts, all sorts of teams, and are able to mobilize resources to help projects. And we do a ton of work all over the space, some with Linux Foundation, some with Google, some with Amazon Web Services, a bunch of other folks. And I co-chair this working group with Jeff, who was not feeling well and couldn't be here today. But yeah, again, thanks for being here, Seth. And last but not least, we have David Wheeler. If you want to give a really quick intro, give Seth a
Really quick intro. I'm David A. Wheeler. I work at the Linux Foundation.
There you go.
I can follow instructions too. So I do lots of security, open source software things. So I'll leave it at that and we can talk more later, but let's dive in.
Let's dive in indeed. Okay. I think first on the agenda, we have updates from Caleb.
Muted, Caleb.
You heard didn't hear all my stumblings. Yeah, so a month or so ago, we, I think hopefully we emailed a document out that we had been considering for the package analysis project. So the package analysis project, we do a lot of, we see a lot of packages, we see malicious packages, and part of the challenge is how do we like surface those, particularly for like improving the kind of value of the project and being able to communicate that, but also in a form that people can consume and make use of. So we propose this repository where we publish OSV, or open source vulnerabilities, formatted reports that we generate from our infrastructure. And then, yeah, so that's something we've been working on. If you have been looking at the repo or following its commits, you'll see that there's been a bunch of activity over the last few weeks. And it's now at a point where we are preparing internally to start pushing out OSV that we've been generating to the repo. But it's also ready for people who are interested in contributing to be able to do that as well. So I have a PR with some documentation. But yeah, just wanted to kind of tell people that this has happened, that this is something we've been working on, and get any feedback that people have around this and this concept. I'm kind of optimistic at this potentially being able to change the ecosystem in a way that's better, but I don't know, that's probably my optimism. But yeah, got some hands, David.
Yeah. So while having some results in some repo somewhere is probably a great start, I would like to plug this in to the various places that load in OSV. I'm really thinking of like the per ecosystem things where, presumably they would want to know, already there are a number of package managers and ecosystems which load in OSVs and then use that to do things like, oh, you got a vulnerable version update, or in this case, oh, you've got a vulnerable version, either stop using it or upgrade. I mean, it depends on whether or not it's a subverted version or the whole thing is an attack. And I don't know if you can. I'm not sure how you can determine that through automated means, to be honest.
So this is our stage 2 plan is to, when we get some content in there, is to work with osv.dev, who like they literally sit across the office from me at work. So to get the data consumed by osv.dev. So that then means it rolls into their collection, and people can opt into using that themselves. And with the idea, like, this is not perfect. It's not going to stop people from novel attacks, but the idea is to, stop people from the attacks that are there, and to be able to like do better at detecting whether or not they're being compromised. So yeah, this is the next stage after we've got OSV, is to start getting it consumed.
Have you talked with them and maybe some of the repos? Because I wouldn't be surprised in general, I'm sure that they would want to do this, but there may be some concerns I would rather nip in the bud, so that, because as soon as possible, I would like to get to the point where there's an alert, the whole package starts working, where the pipeline starts getting through.
Do you mean, when you say repos, do you mean the open source package repositories?
NPM, PyPI, Ruby Gems, those kinds of things, the repos and registries.
So I had a brief email with Dustin, and I mean Seth, whose hands raised, probably has some thoughts on this as well. It's one of these, like, we've got to build it to prove itself as valuable.
Sure.
So that's kind of partly why we're doing it, and also like to make package analysis interesting for people to contribute to. So that's kind of like on that motivation. In my mind, I would love for this to be integrated with repos, and for that to be something that enables like a faster response to malware being detected. But it may not necessarily be. It may be something that flags it and says, "Oh, we've noticed that this is potentially a problem," but doesn't restrict access. But this is like really comes down to the quality of the data we have, how trusted it can be, and also how quickly we can have it consumed and build those pipelines. So, and this is kind of evolving. I'd love for it to be accepted by repos, but we haven't really started those discussions yet. I have a brief discussion, and Dustin basically said, not yet, we're building our own thing, and it will depend on Seth and what he does. So, and maybe, I don't know if you or Seth, working for PyPA as well as just the PSF? Like, I mean, you can tell us more, your hand's raised.
Yeah, so I have a few things to say. I definitely 100% agree with what David said, that like reducing the time from detection to like when it gets in the hands of the people that are most likely to be able to remediate for the ecosystem is important. The Python package index just received funding, and I'm posting something in the chat right now. This is an announcement for automated malware detection for external sources. This is something that's funded. It's not something that I personally am going to be implementing, because we're also hiring an engineer. The PSF is hiring an engineer to work specifically on PyPI and features. So this will likely go to this individual. Yeah, that's one thing. The other side of it is what was that? I was waiting for so long. Oh, now I can't remember what I was going to say. The second thing, I'll try to remember what it was. But yeah, basically reducing the mean time to resolution was the big thing.
Yeah, Seth, I can stall for you. Malware detection's hard, so I have no problems with multiple streams of efforts, each of them trying to do this sort of thing. There is the challenge of false positives on a malware report. So I'm guessing that there's some sort of, the tool detects it, it then goes through some human to verify, and then it goes out. But yeah, I would very much like to see a pipeline. And you know, if the Python, if the Python Software Foundation's already doing this, some in detection itself, that's going to make is the wrong word, but they're already going to have a way of taking that data and turning it into something actionable. So having
this isn't the just because I want to make sure we're not going down the wrong path. This isn't the Python package index doing the malware detection. This is an endpoint that allows external malware detection, people that are already doing this work, to be able to automate it in an automated fashion, be able to mark like a certain release or a certain file. Yes.
Oh,
And that's very
okay.
cool.
Even better. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this is cool, because then we can build that into the repository as well. And that can become a way for it to end up in PyPI quickly. So it's like, there are lots of opportunities in this space. And yeah, I agree with you, David, that like, this is where I think competition is really good for security, and having lots of diversity in the ecosystem will improve the safety for people who are using open source. And I'm okay with that. Like, I think that's fine. But I like, part of my hope as well from this is that response times, exactly what you said, Seth, can go down, because often these packages eventually do get taken down, but there's this window where people are exposed before a security researcher is able to like get that report written, get it submitted to a package repository, someone at the package repository to triage it and process it. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe just the thing that I remembered is that in this post here, Caleb, if you actually go all the way through to the blog post, not just the discuss post, I think there's like a form, like a Google form that you can reach out. And then, because I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to solicit feedback from a lot of different people that would end up using this endpoint. So definitely do that. And the other side of this, I think, is one of the goals. Maybe I'm not sure if it's explicitly listed out or not, but one of the goals that I would really like to see done is that if we have enough sources and we have enough like historical data on how valid those sources have been historically, right? Like we can kind of build something maybe that is automated, that doesn't have a human intervention. If it comes back to it fast enough that, okay, our top 5, scanners have all said this is malware. Let's do a soft like delete of this file, and then let a human like flip the switch back to the other way around. I think that's one of the goals of this project as well.
That's secretly my plan as well, is to be able to incentivize people to enter this space by effectively by becoming a clearinghouse for reports of malicious packages. You can then incentivize people to contribute that wouldn't necessarily do that, and they can compete on a level playing field with bigger players. So that's kind of my secret. I'd like, that would be great, because then it incentivizes competition. Especially, I'm like, it'd be great to have a scoreboard, and you can see who's submitting stuff. You can then see which sources are producing lots of false positives. And I mean, this is good generally just for the health of the data set, but yeah, gamification. So yes, these are all great ideas. So and the other part, the transparency is really important too. I think part of the challenge has been that npm or like Ruby Gems, for example, will mark something as revoked, but other repositories like Pipey and Pipey, you can go and query BigQuery, and like you can compare what you can see publicly with what's in the database and go, oh, that's probably been pulled. But other things like npm, they may or may not publish an advisory saying something was malware. So often, as people who consume open source, you don't even know if the package that's not there anymore was pulled because of the security problem. So that's the other part of this that's interesting.
Yeah. And I should quickly add, unless they've changed their policies, the CVE process excludes malicious code. So which is completely, I think, not just wrong-headed, but completely misses the point. The whole point of the CVE process is to let people know you need to do something. And if you're not going to tell people about some of the most important things when they need to do something, you have no idea what you're doing, or at least you're not understanding the viewpoint of the users of vulnerability reporting processes. So I'm glad to see this kind of thing. And I may be wrong, but they may have changed their policies on this. I hope they have. I mean, I'd love to see this.
Yeah, I think that's also a problem that's more prevalent in open source than like private organizations tend to want to make money, and they don't do that by compromising their customers. So
ask SolarWinds.
Well, okay.
I'm not, many organizations. I mean, Microsoft has had distributed CDs with viruses in them way back when. So I mean, it's in the open source world. It actually is pretty rare too. Yeah, Sony. Sony, there's multiple issues there, but I mean, Sony's a big org, to be fair too. But I mean, my point though is that this is not a common problem, but it is a significant problem when it happens. Now, the vast majority of open source software projects never have malicious code, but then there's the one that do.
Yeah, there's also the problem of like name reuse, right? Like if you have, for example, on PyPI, you can, if a name gets pulled for being malicious, I mean, I think that the process, and don't quote me on this, I don't know for certain if this is the way it works, but I think that there is a process for you to be able to reclaim a name that's been taken down by PyPI.
I have seen a package get pulled from PyPI that eventually that was malicious, and then a new package under that name got posted that was malicious as well. So I think, yeah, name reuse is definitely a thing. It's interesting as well. There are some like OSV itself doesn't account for dependency confusion, and it assumes that the resources, packages being pulled are from the public repositories. So there is kind of some challenge in consuming this for people who have internal registries. So, but that said, like, it's also not necessarily a bad thing that you know that your internal package has been dependency confusion attacked. So
Caleb,
yeah.
let me clarify. I think what you said, strictly speaking, isn't correct, but I understand where you're coming from. If you go look at at least the package URL spec, if you say it came from Maven, then it came from Maven. That's what you're reporting it on. Now, you can also include it's using this protocol, but it's from somewhere else. You can include a URL and so on and say, okay, it's this format, but it's coming from over here, and that can handle both the multiple repositories. This is particularly common for systems packages. You know, if you're Adobe, for example, you may distribute a Linux package that is from your own repo. It's not in Fedoras or Debians or Ubuntu's.
Even better. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but-
good.
Okay, but and you can even use that for internal repos. Presuming an org has an internal repo and you give it a URL, shame on you if you're not, you could include that. Now, I'm giving you the technically correct answer, which is as we know, is always the best answer, right? The problem, of course, is that people are sometimes kind of sloppy. In other words, well, I'm loading it and it's supposed to be just a copy from Maven, so I'll identify as the Maven version. Did you download it from Maven? No, I downloaded it from my local copy. So here's the thing. So I'm going to argue that technically it's not exactly that way, but in practice, oh yeah, that happens all the time. There's a way to handle it if only people used it that way. I don't know if that comment makes any sense.
No, it makes sense, and it's one of these things. I'm like, oh, this is a use case that I'm kind of not sure about, but yeah, like that's much nicer. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the thing is, dependency confusion has become one of the most common. I mean, it's typo squatting has been the most common problem for a very long time, and then dependency confusion rose to the top. We don't know what's going to be coming up next year, but you know, it's not going to go away. So
yeah,
in the long term, the solution is modify the package manager code so that this is not a thing. But until that happens, it's going to be a thing.
yeah. Anyway, that's it from me. Yeah, thank you for your feedback. I'm happy to hear there's positive kind of opinions generally. So thank you.
Oh, this is great. I mean, it really looks like, you know, hey, we've got a group that wants to send data and a group that wants to receive data. I mean, that's that does sound like exactly the right piece parts to make this turn this into a real pipeline.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you again for the update, Caleb. Next on the agenda, we have feedback on the critical open source software projects 2023 document. We decided that we weren't going to move forward with kind of marketing the set and publishing the set kind of in a until we've kind of put more thought into it and get more I guess we could say more diversity in terms of the input that we get and how this is kind of vetted and generated. I was honestly kind of relieved to see the significant amount of feedback. It was almost validating that, you know, this is not an easy undertaking. And the fact that it was kind of that there was a good amount of feedback, honestly, was I was happy to see that, and it was good to see, because it really was it was a challenge, and it was a good exercise, and I think we learned a lot, and we do have some output, and I think we're going to keep we're going to keep working on it, hopefully getting more input and feedback. I've thought about ways of, you know, potentially getting more, I guess, activity into getting more feedback and more insight into, you know, which projects to identify. But I do, yeah, just want to acknowledge the good amount of feedback that we got. And it looks like, did we get some feedback from you, Seth, on that as well? So I'd love to hear from your, you know, from your angle, you know, your thoughts and your feedback.
Yeah, the first set of feedback that I kind of saw was there are some tools in that list, but a lot of the there's like a specific topic for language ecosystems, like Python, for example, right? But then the package manager is there for Ruby, but not for Python. And I think that a lot of the metrics have a hard time with tools, because I was looking through like what are the other tools that are in the list, and almost all of them don't come through in the criticality score. They all come through some other source, which is good because they're getting included, but then it means that they're getting missed by this automated source that something not, I don't know how to solve that problem. It's just a hard problem. Yeah, the other side of it was more on the transitive dependency side. It mentioned transitive dependencies, but a lot of these, like there are some projects in there where, yes, that is like just a base building block like curl or something like that, where, you know, that's just a building block and there's not really like this huge network of dependencies that's downstream. But then there's the complete other side where, you know, Python, you know, has like maybe 30, 40 libraries that are very important to Python existing. Like OpenSSL is obviously in that list, but some of them aren't. And like, how does that fit into this story of saying that this more top level, recognizable, more likely to get talked about project is in this list, but then all of these other downstream dependencies that if they weren't there, this project wouldn't be able to do its thing. How do we reconcile that?
Yeah. It's definitely, it's proven to be a difficult undertaking.
Hallelujah. I don't know. Amen. Amen. That's not a hallelujah, but it is an amen.
Yeah. But
I'm sure you've heard like all of this feedback before, and I'm just new to this group, so I apologize if I'm going down a path that's already been gone down.
No worries at all. It's always good to hear a new take or a different take, and you know, that's I think where the value comes from, right? Is in the discussion and in the collaboration. So yeah, so I'm not entirely sure where we want to go from here, I suppose. I mean, I guess we are still getting feedback, but I don't know if the group has any thoughts on kind of where to go next, or how to put more, I guess, meat on this. I'm certainly open to thoughts and ideas, and of course, getting more activity, you know, between this group and the community at large.
Well, I have ideas. That doesn't mean you didn't necessarily do them, but I have some thoughts.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I think in the short, so I guess I'll try to write proposals as we go here. So what I would propose is in the, I don't know if you can see my little comments I wrote in these things, and you know, I've talked separately with you, Mir, and you know, with both the co-leads. I mean, formally, we can, if you want to make this marketing, if you want to try to do a marketing campaign, the idea is you talk to the staff, work with the TAC to make sure that's okay. But on the quick initial look, I will say that that staff, frankly, is really nervous about this. The fundamental, I mean, you know, if the TAC wants to say yay, but I think I would argue, by all means, record what you've done. Okay. You know, post as a link off the web, off the working group. I mean, the previous version is already that way, but I want to be careful about not making a big deal of this yet. The challenge that we've got right now is that this is so hard and there's been so much painful work that I don't know if you've been following some of the numbers of participants, but we had more people earlier. And then when every other week, okay, sit down, we're going to talk in gruesome, painful detail through a spreadsheet. We may get through 10 or 15 rows today for an hour. That took a toll on a lot of people. And the reality is I want to commend everyone who put in effort, because that was amazing. But it's a little hard to argue that this is a sense of the entire open source software community when you end up with a very small number of the willing to take the slog. And so I think it's been valuable, and I think the results have been helpful. There are some known problems with it. David Ellison noted some problems. I think some other folks have. So here's what I would suggest. First of all, I want to try to convince you. I think Amir, Amir, we lost your video. You okay?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right. So what I would say is, yes, let's post on the repo page, hey, here's the updated version. Let's not make a blog post or a big deal of it yet, because we know there's some challenges. And here's the problem: we're basically anticipating if we made a big deal of it, that a lot of people are basically going to have a big pushback about the, wait a minute, what's on the list? And frankly, why is this very small group of people deciding for global, for all of the world? And those are hard questions to answer. So,
Yeah.
but I do want to acknowledge all the hard work done. And first of all, the results of this, for sure, they're going to go straight to Alpha Omega, because that's their, they care about this. They use the previous list. I'm expecting a couple other groups to use the list, because this is one of the best lists we have. We know their problems, but when you have something versus nothing for a lot of organizations, having partial work that's the best available in the world, that's better than nothing. And hooray for that. So this list is not going to get, the work is not going to get wasted. Okay. But I would say, don't do the blog post, do finish up, work through the comments, and make a best list with the processes we've got. Then either in parallel or whatever, let's talk about how can we get far more eyeballs on this problem. How can we turn this into something where we're not scared to make a claim because, yeah, okay, 5 people sat in the back room on video calls and decided for everybody. That's obviously not what the intent was. But we need to find a way to get a broader consensus on work that's frankly really hard. So we need to figure out a way to do that. And that's what I would propose we talk through. Jacques had worked out some approaches. He had a lot of good information. His approach, the one problem that he had was that he basically was thinking about, hey, you need to build a new tool. And then building a new tool is hard, so that kind of got stalled. I think that we could implement those processes without building specialized tools. And that might be helpful. So basically, I would like to finish what we did. We're at the 90% level. Finish that, and then go back and talk about, all right, we've got a version. How can we get a much broader community, more quantitative data on it? All right, and I yield the floor to the other David.
Yes, thanks very much. And given I'm in New York and we got the smoke from Canada again, we can now officially claim that we're making these decisions in a smoke-filled room. So, and great suggestions, David, about how to approach this. I definitely agree that we should, try to move this to a conclusion that something is better than nothing. I think it's also important to communicate that, look, it's really impossible to do this as a democracy. And it's still, who do you choose, as the quote unquote community who's going to vote on this? That ultimately there has to be some, and it's like, okay, why not the 5 of us or whoever? It has to be somebody. I agree that building another tool, but if we can try to figure out some data-driven process and it's more objective, I think that would help. But the main suggestion I had is where I also mentioned this at the TAC meeting with the great presentation about that, is that I think we need to be really clearer about, who basically the input and output of this. It's like, who exactly is the consumer of this? Who is going to accept this? Because in some, this existed before the OpenSSF really existed. And it's a great project and great to work on this, but I think that it was sort of done in a vacuum, and that was part of it. So not only is it a matter of, people who are willing to slog through this, but it was also, sort of this, self-selected in multiple ways. I mean, it's almost this secret working group in a certain way. So I think that, and we'll see if OMCAR and the TAC can help with this of, who exactly is the consumer of this? What do they actually want? What are we going to do with this? As you said, yes, we can put it out there in CISO. There are various groups who would like something, but I think then we should be clear about it of, both explicitly who is going to requesting this or use it, and also implicitly of what government agencies in the US, Europe, wherever might use this, so that we have a better framework for that mission, and a better, and figuring out what we're going to do with it. And also more clarity on, again, what is the input? I mean, who is presenting this, or from the suggestions, the analysis of, GitHub. I mean, now we got this list from whatever 10,000 projects from Alpha Omega. I mean, there's just, so, what's the driver on the other side of how we're going to collect this information, or for whether we or whoever is making this decision. So I think that trying to get clarity about the pipeline is really critical to helping this, and maybe, again, as Seth, as we're saying, maybe we need to have, or I mean, based on his comments, different lists. I mean, these are, one of the things that bothered me, I made the comments, and there is, we made this list and said, oh, well, we need to, cut this down to 100. Well, okay, like, where did that come from? And, maybe, I mean, well, I know where it came from, but it's like, okay, we create this list, and then, oh, well, it needs to be the set of 100 is not list, all these sorts of appearance, decisions. But then also maybe we need to have, as you're saying, a list for tools and a list for this, and maybe we need, different facets of this, not just the one, list of, critical projects or 100 critical projects, or whatever. But we say that, okay, for these different, 100 critical projects for the Linux ecosystem, 100 critical projects for embedded, or I mean, not 100, but the critical projects for the BSD ecosystem. We try to provide some more clarity about what this is supposed, because, again, as David said, this is the the committee of the willing, or the self-selected set, but it was coming from a particular point of view, and we were a lot of times trying to determine, given our own, and admitting our own limitations of knowledge of, okay, this is this important for this ecosystem, is that ecosystem, maybe we need to have a little bit more detail and clarity about these different types of ecosystems, and different sets of critical projects for different things. And again, maybe, as Seth was saying, maybe you want a list that's these top level tentpole, famous projects, whatever, and then you have another list of, okay, here's the really low level dependencies that aren't, name brands, but these are the critical projects that really feed into everything in this ecosystem. And again, things like, glibc and GCC and, OpenSSL, and all these things feed into that. So that's what I think is, some more clarity. But I really think that, sorry to belabor this again and again, and but getting better communication, having a better sort of mission statement from who's going to consume this, what are they going to do with it, how is this going to feed into the entire OpenSSF pipeline. And I think that would drive a lot of the other clarity about what should be on one or multiple critical projects list sets. Sorry.
Yeah, so let me make a quick reply and add to your list. So in terms, okay, so as far as who's the consumer, I mean, I think in general, we kind of got started, had some overall statements, and off we went. Maybe so, increased clarity. Maybe that's really the next step. We have done this, and in the process, we've learned some things. Now let's really put down and make clear. As far as the consumer specifically, I know that I had specific ideas. That does not mean they were clearly written down or that anyone shared them. But at least from my vantage point, one of the main reasons for the critical project list was to help focus organizations who we want to improve the security of open source. We cannot do everything, so we are going to focus limited resources on limited places. There are actually a number of organizations which want to do that. Alpha Omega within OpenSSF itself is one of those. CISA is one. I know that I don't know if they've actually gone through and done it, but I believe that there's been a lot of talk about the U.S. Department of Defense, believe it or not, trying to identify the ones that they use the most because they want weapons to only go boom when they're supposed to. I know the Europeans, particularly, there's a group that's funded by the German government. The U.S. has something else called the Sovereign Tech Fund, which my brain is bending a little bit because it's not, is this government or not? Well, it's, that's complicated, but I know that they can give you the correct answer. I've forgotten what the correct answer is. But in any case, there are groups which know that society is depending on open source and want to do some investments, but they want to do smart investments. So they were trying to figure out the important things. And so they would very much like a hand from, or at least top cover for some of the things that they would like to focus on. Now, okay. Yes. Thank you, Seth. Yeah. Open Technology Fund. That's right. I'm sorry. Yeah. The STF is German. OTF is US. But there's Open Technology Fund. There's a number of these orgs is my point. And I actually think some companies internally have had some of those. They're picking a few, and we want to help them do that. Okay. As far as what to be clear on, I think not just the inputs and the outputs, but the criteria and the process. I mean, right now, frankly, there's been a very short description of what's the criteria. And there has been a process of, okay, it's basically a democratic vote of whoever happens to be there. I think we can do better than that. So for example, I think that we could be persnickety about, before you vote, people have to sit down ahead of time and start inferring information so that the voting decisions are based on full information. I do know that in several cases, a number of folks were not familiar with that particular software component, and so we had a few who were, and the person who knew something, ends up having the full vote, which is not really how the process is supposed to go. I mean, it's not crazy. There was certainly no malicious intent, but I think that we can do better, as well as just finding a way to get a lot larger participation, so it's a much larger group. I don't think this is a smoky room. For one thing, smoke doesn't work well through video calls, and we're getting recorded. So we're trying to be really transparent. So I don't think transparency is the problem technically, but it is a problem of lack of not enough participation, not through exclusion, but simply because it's been really hard to get people to pull very heavy loads. And so I think going back and figuring out how can we make it so we can get more inputs, finding a way to distribute the load so that we get that broader perspective without making such heavy demands on the people who have slogged it out, to whom I'm eternally grateful. Okay, I'm done. Seth?
Yeah, my point was more on the, if we are just talking about kind of like if this is an input to something else, like knowing what that input is, because if a lot of that is more about giving visibility, getting support from organizations, all of that. I really, it's tough for me to say like, oh, you have to get it 100% right, like in 2 years, than like getting it 80% right today, and then further refining. Like, it's hard for me to say like, oh yeah, just have all of those organizations that are trying to support open source just wait a little bit longer. It's like, why?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it
Right,
seems
exactly.
like,
But the thing is that we don't need a marketing plan. We know all these folks. I mean, there aren't that many of these organizations, maybe internal to a company, maybe, but at least for things like Alpha Omega. I mean, hi, Michael. You know, it's just not, you know,
right. Yeah, no, I wasn't necessarily saying that it needs to be marketed. I'm just
right.
maybe more patting folks on the back because this is hard. And
Well, yeah, but I mean, getting back to what David said, I mean, I think I'll respond specifically. I mean, as I just put it, I think part of the problem, again, is, and why I say consuming, is I think that there was lack of participation because, I mean, it's difficult work and it's slogging and all the things that David said, but people didn't see a specific benefit or outcome to like, okay, if a project's not on the list, what's it going to matter? Or if a project is on the list, oh, how is that going to help with the project? So that's what I'm saying. You need to have a specific reward mechanism. You need to have some sort of feedback mechanism that encourages people to participate in this. Okay, if you're on this, that means that you're going to get, you know, I mean, not a guarantee, but that this is how we're going to determine OpenSSF grants or Alpha Omega grants, or there's, you know, something where people see other than, oh, it's a bunch of self-selected, you know, nerds that just decided to, you know, list their favorite projects. You know, maybe that's, I mean, yeah, I'm not what it was. I'm not saying this is what it was, but I'm saying that from the outside, it can look that way. And if people don't see any reason, it's like, why am I going to sit for, you know, every other week for an hour and slog through this and to a list that's just going to go in the, you know, in the circular file? I mean, like, you know, that's where I think there was the lack of messaging and the lack of what's the reward for actually, and that's what I'm saying, how is it going to be consumed? What does this fit into the OpenSSF and the entire software security pipeline and infrastructure that we're concerned about?
All right, that makes complete sense to me. So and I actually think, well, at least for that part, clarity on who the consumers are, we should be able to knock that out, or at least make considerable improvements quite quickly. Maybe this call or the next one. Basically, at least the inputs, at least some of the inputs, some of the outputs. I think that within the next few gatherings, we should be able to more, you know, well, at least the inputs and the outputs, and maybe at least make decent progress on criteria, and maybe even a process. Now, if we just are going to continue to use this existing process, that's one thing. But if we do, I think we've got to find a way to broaden the number of participants. I think clarifying the outputs and who is important. David, I'm not sure that that's going to be enough to get a lot more participation. I think it'll help. I think you're right. I don't think it'll be enough.
I think it depends on how big the reward is, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, literally, I mean, I just say, okay, you know, if you're on this list, I mean, this is like, you know, this is $1 million. I mean, you know, if it's something, you know, I'm not saying, I'm not saying you can't, but I'm just, you know, at a certain level, oh, you get to, you know, invited to, if you're in the Beltway, I mean, to a Washington D.C. dinner party at the White House. You know, there's certain things that I mean, I'm not joking. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not joking. I mean,
no, that sometimes is a penalty, not a reward. But carry on. I'm already DC.
Or, you know, or you get to go to, you know, OpenSSF Day. I mean, you know, we'll get a scholarship to the Linux Foundation event. Or, I mean, you know, there's, you know, certain things, yeah, but
get some
swag.
swag.
What I'm saying is that, I mean, different people have different motivations, but there are levels of motivations that at a certain level, it is worthwhile for people to participate, especially with people who are, you know, in these communities. If you say, okay, this will help, you know, your community, this will, or Caleb, I mean, again, I don't know if we get, you know, this could help. I mean, when I'm mentioning Caleb is back to Google, you know, this could help with Google Summer of Code. I mean, if you're listed high in there, then you can get a boost for the number of people who, you know, slots you get in the Google Summer. You know, those sorts of things. I'm just spitballing, but it's just like those sorts of things where you see, okay, here's a real definitive benefit from participating, making sure your project on the list, if it deserves to be there, then, you know, so that's where I'm trying, and I'm saying just for us to sort of brainstorm about the OpenSSF, to brainstorm of what, and for us to get in the TAC as well, what do we think are the rewards that would be useful to this community, and then work
Okay.
back from there.
All right, that's a fair thing. And you know what? We can start by asking, groups here, what would motivate. I'm not sure. I don't think that any of these groups like Alpha Omega are willing to say, hey, whatever list you come up with, they're immediately going to get a certain amount of money. They have their own processes. But they can certainly promise to say, oh yeah, we're absolutely going to look at this list and we're considering the 100, by the way, is in part from Alpha Omega, but the other folks we've talked to, nobody's really said it has to be exactly 100. Okay, that's not. But the feedback in general has been from some of these groups. We would love to know a list of what you think is most important, especially when you have some rationale. It can't be millions. We don't expect it to be 2. So if you're going to argue that 100 is an arbitrary number, let me help agree with you now. But the notion was a somewhat bounded number that, and now one challenge is for most of these orgs, many of these orgs, they don't want to know just what's important. They also want to know what needs most help. That's even a harder analysis because, like, the Python Software Foundation, I am sure that you can use any resources that anybody can send to you, but there are organizations who are far worse off. There's the maintainer who's doing it every couple months and takes a couple hours on the weekends, and that's it. And the Lib Nebraska problem. So yes, so we have not tried to cross that bridge, and I understand why that may be a bridge too far. If we can bring it down to approximately 100, though, other organizations can then go and do that analysis and come up with different answers once they have a smaller set to analyze. So if we think it needs to be 150 instead of 100, I don't think anybody's going to take away our birthday.
Is that what you just mentioned? The potentially harder problem of finding critical packages that also need help. Is that like something that is on the roadmap for this working group, or is it?
I think it was originally intended, but I'm not sure this group, what's on the roadmap for this group was whatever this group decides. Okay. I am sure that many people would like that information. I can tell Jim Zenlin, who's the president of the Linux Foundation, would like that information. He's been looking for that for a long time. But it's been a challenge. I mean, we funded the Harvard work. And they actually punted on this as well. Just trying to figure out quantitatively what's important turns out to be incredibly painful and hard. And they had to scope it down to just what seems to be important among certain ecosystems that are, that support package managers. And even that quantitatively, I mean, we took an incredible amount of time to do that quantitative analysis, and it intentionally omitted any system packages. So or any applications. So that's kind of a challenge.
I'll call out the scorecard project as well, which attempts to do this in some degree.
No.
It doesn't? Okay.
No. What they do, no. What scorecard does is it attempts to measure whether or not you are performing there are certain good behaviors. Okay. Now, if you have binary artifacts or you don't have, branch protection on, it will note that. If you don't have 2 contributors from 2 different orgs, it will note that. That's not quite the same as this. I mean, so there is a measurement of, is there only 1 contributor versus more, but that's not, it's, I think we're looking for more than that.
Yeah. It's the negative opposite. Like you can't, measuring like whether you're doing the right things as opposed to are you at risk. There is a correlation between people who are doing the right things and risk, but it's not a direct relationship. And it's, yeah.
Exactly. Now, there is actually another relationship. I have already worked with the scorecard folks with the draft report that we had earlier. And we checked and verified, and I made sure that every single one of those is now on their weekly scan. They do a weekly scan with scorecard of about 1.2 million projects. And they include everything on the critical projects list, as well as every project that's getting a best practices badge and various other sources as well. So, now scan does not mean, of course, that they're doing well or not. It's just, but they're part of that weekly scan so that you can quickly get that data and do analysis of it. And that's a first step. So, that's yet another group that's using whatever this critical projects working group does. Other people immediately take that out and do something with it. So people do care.
Excellent. Wow. Well, hours certainly goes by quickly when these discussions, I'll say. So I'll say by next time, let's definitely start to get some of this on paper and start formulating a plan to really kind of tackle this problem and break it down into smaller steps, things that we can do. Definitely would love to hear more solutions and suggestions. So we will see everyone, I think, in 2 weeks.
Okay, but before we go, if I can appeal for 60 more seconds, I would love to have two tracks. One is I would like to try to wrap up the version that we've got. We're at the 90%, but I think several people, David E. being one of them, have noted some problems with the current list. I think, so I think I'd like to make the list the best we can with the processes that we had. And then, and I don't think we have to do this in sequence. And then that next process of, making much clearer the inputs, who gets the outputs, criteria, processes, and figure out how we can broaden the inputs, so we can deal with the concerns with the current set. All good?
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great holiday, everybody. Talk to you in 2 weeks.